Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning, this is Stan coming to you from Gainesville, and today we are discussing Meeting with the Director, Poisonous Haze, Errant Gobos, and More Light Please, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from way up high in the Rocky Mountains. If you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the original Lumen Brothers.
I've flown back in, but not to the mountains.
Sort of like the original Pancake House.
Yeah, that's pretty syrupy.
Very syrupy.
It's a sticky place to eat.
Okay, what's your least favorite Pancake House syrup?
Blueberry.
Blueberry, okay.
Yeah, I'm with Steve. I'm with Steve on that one. Probably
to me, it was boysenberry.
What was the favorite?
Oh, my maple. I'm a purist.
Yeah. What was the favorite pancake, though? You know.
Oh, I remember. Steve, what was your favorite pancake?
Buckwheat.
Okay.
Buckwheat. They had a chocolate chip pancake.
Okay, and my favorite pancake was the Swedish pancake. They were very thin with lots of butter. Well, as you all can hear, Stan is back with us today. Hey, brother Stan, what's been going on?
Hey, you know, I had a unique experience the other day. I sat down on the patio and I had a moment where I didn't have to do anything. And I went, whoa, let's just stop and think about that. For this whole day, there is nothing I have to do. I savored that. That was nice. But I do have projects, 5 of them, all running, and in different phases of development. So my creative juices are still active, and one of them is lighting. The other 3 are buildings, and so that's good. But and I'm trying to plan to travel. I'm trying to figure out how much it's going to cost to go to Washington and California and not break the bank and be out and do my sabbatical stuff. So I'm planning for sabbatical.
That's right. You have a sabbatical coming up in the fall, right?
I am. I'll be able to do more Light Talk. So all those other hosts, just back off.
Back off, Zach. Back off, Ellen.
Stan's back. Look out.
Speaking of Ellen, she's sort of a big part of our news segment. And I'm really excited. I think we're really excited about that. But speaking of which, let's start off with news. That's right. There's been a lot of news this week, and some of them in the lighting industry that's more general, some very personal. First of all, we lost a legend of light this week, Mr. Tom Munn from San Francisco Opera. He was there for many, many decades. He was truly a great artist and a very nice man, and unfortunately, we lost him the other day. I mean, I was fortunate to have met him many years ago, but, you know, being in the opera, he was just one of the gods of lighting. There are a lot of great shows that went through San Francisco, and he created a lot of beautiful designs. That
original, what was the opera that he did with David Hockney? And it was like the first use of Verilight, I think, in an opera, Steve, is that right?
Yeah, he used I think he used the twos. And he, oddly enough, he talked about that. It caught him by surprise how noisy they were right. during the really quiet moments of the opera when there was just like dead silence. And they figured it out how to use them and how to program them so that the noise was not distracting. A man who thought on his feet very quickly.
Listen, we're going to all miss Tom. Like I said, he was a super, super good human being. So R.I.P. Tom. Okay, so now for a little Light Talk news. This past month in June, we broke the all-time...
We broke Light Talk?
We broke Light Talk? We broke Light Talk. We broke the all-time download record for 1 month, where we had over 10,000 downloads. Now, that is unbelievable. Now...
I don't know what the hell they're listening to, these people. I really don't. Well, I listen to you guys. That's true.
Do you really, Stan? Do you listen to us when you're not?
Well, I'd say it's about 60-40.
40% you do and 60% you don't. All right, I'll take that. No, I think we should give credit to our wonderful Lumen sister, Ellen.
You think she's the draw? She's the draw?
Absolutely.
Not only she's a draw, she knows a lot of people in the industry, and we had 2 amazing back-to-back interviews.
Interviews, that's true. Yeah.
We could thank Ellen for that. And, and she's such a great interviewer also. She has a lot of experience, which is one
She's
of the
like Larry King. She just asks the question and shuts up.
She is Larry King. She's the female Larry King.
She's the female Larry King. There you go,
I never thought about that.
Ellen King.
So anyway, yes, we broke a record. That's fantastic. And we're way over 300,000 downloads for all time. Going on 400,000.
What if we had like a nickel for every one of those?
No, we're not going to get a nickel. It's not going to happen.
A shekel then.
I got a shekel. My third bit of news is actually very personal. My good friend Pat Pierce resigned from Central City Opera a couple of weeks ago, right when I was having COVID, actually. I was kind of isolated. I've known Pat since the beginning of my career. He was like the first artistic director to hire me to design a major opera. I was like 25 years old, and he really gave me my first break. I also met a lot of the directors who I still work with today through Pat. So, I owe a lot to him. He supported my career and my students' education since I started designing at Central City Opera in 1998. Pat brought cutting-edge operas to Central City. He hired amazing directors like my dear friends Ken Kazan and Paul Curran, and was responsible for igniting my career. And due to this artistic change, now this is the big news. After 23 years, I am retiring from Central City Opera. This is it. This is my last summer. And I'm leaving some good friends, but it's time for me to follow Pat down that mountain. So my best wishes to all my friends at Central City, and my love and deep admiration and respect for my friend Pat Pierce.
Congratulations on your graduation.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't know if it's a graduation. It's more like just a new chapter. Okay. I should have graduated 20
Mazel
20
tov.
years
I'll
ago.
say mazel tov then.
So anyway, enough. Thank you for indulging me in that. And Steve has our first question.
Yes, it comes from Paul in Orlando. And he writes, I am trying to find a good budget haze effect. I was told to use a hot plate. And that's a warning sign, Paul.
No.
Red flags were going up all over.
I was told to use a hot plate, an iron skillet, nothing good's going to come from this, and powdered Salammoniac or Salammoniac. What do you think? Well,
Next question. Gene from Bangkok asks.
Salammoniac. I mean, God intended for that to be used on your soldering iron. To kind of get your soldering iron in shape, repair a little minor damage on it.
Wait, don't they use Salammoniac in gas chambers, to execute people?
I'm looking it up because I want to know really what they use it for.
They use it for soldering irons. It usually comes in a block form, so old Paul here is going to smash it up into a powder to really, really pollute the area. It's moderately hazardous to breathe this stuff. It causes irritation. It's shortness of breath, cough, nausea, a bleeding nose, headache, liver disease, just little stuff like that.
Uncontrollable bowel movements. I've had those. With Salammoniac.
Wait a minute. I have to kind of come back at you. I'm looking at a beautiful picture of it where they mine it in Tajikistan, but it's used in bakery products, cookies, biscuits, crisp texture. For its food grade baking, it's used as Salammoniac is known as a licorice, for instance, in salty licorice and other pastilles.
But what's the difference between what you're doing and what Paul's doing? What they're doing is they're using it in baking. Paul is going to smash it up and burn it and float the powder in the air, which they're not doing.
Yeah, but in the baking, then you're eating it, right?
Stan, when you were in high school, did you try to smoke oregano? Because
of course, didn't you?
Because we did, and it was not good. And you eat oregano, so it's not a good thing.
No,
when
I did something
like
worse. I smoked tobacco.
A Tide Pod is good in the washing machine. It's not so good in your stomach. The problem is that that floating haze poses respiratory hazards. So it's headaches, eye irritation. this is just nothing good is going to come from you on a hot plate and a cast iron skillet burning Salammoniac and then running around the stage with it trying to get it dispersed. I think we have to work past things like good budget or cheap or I don't have any money. I think those days are gone. If you want some guidance in this, the Actors Equity Association website, it's right there, and they even put a little paragraph up at the very beginning, and it says, "Please remember that no haze, smoke, e-smoking, and vaping with glycerol or any glycerol products may be used unless it's included in the current AEA study. When creating effects with dry ice, liquid carbon dioxide, liquid nitrogen, vaporized water, and other substances that are not listed in the study, please contact AEA for guidance on that." So yes, I'm sure in the 1920s and 1930s, people were using Salammoniac and getting all kinds of wonderful haze on the stage. But those days are past us. We now understand the dangers of some of the things that we have done. I mean, even taking a look at a lighting fixture, the pigtail coming out of the light used to be asbestos. Now, I mean, that type of asbestos is not the type of asbestos that people were worried about in regards to taking walls down and floors up in buildings. But it's still not a good thing to interact with, so it hits the ban list. So I would not do this. Your friend has a bad idea. Bad idea.
I'll say one quick thing. Jerry Lewis would say, "Don't suck it."
Okay, don't suck it. Okay, I got to tell you, Steve, when I started at the Miami Opera as the resident assistant, we used Salammoniac and heater coils to create haze.
And what's happened to your hair? What has happened to your hair?
My hair is the least of my problems right now.
No, I remember that. I remember getting the heater coils and doing the same thing.
There was a cone, right? It was like a ceramic cone with a coil around it. The theatrical suppliers sold it. We used it too. There was no haze machines.
Okay, here's the problem, okay? Because we used it for about 2 years. And whenever we would use, and for opera singers were breathing this crap, okay? I couldn't believe it. And I won't mention names, but the designers specified it because I don't even think there were Roscoe fog machines back then, were there?
Well, no, it was just so cheap.
Well, an iron lung's not cheap. So, unfortunately,
yeah,
people...
but you're overstating it. It's not as toxic.
You never used it, Stan. Have you ever breathed it?
I did. We did.
Did you suck on it? I mean, did you actually bring it into your lungs?
I put my mouth right over that cone, inhaled it directly. No, what I'm telling you is that.
So what's going to happen? Let me just do my Stan imitation for a second.
Suck on the Salammoniac, damn it.
Your Honor, I didn't think they would take me seriously, ma'am, when I told them to use this at the high school musical.
Kids, don't do it. Don't do it. That's all I have to say.
It's not as toxic as you're making it out to be. Right. But to use Steve's analogy with asbestos, let me weigh in on that one. So asbestos is absolutely a carcinogen. It gets into your lungs, no question about it. Now, it has to be, according to OSHA, well, whether you want to believe the government or not, most of the time on this stuff I do, it has to be in what's called the friable state, which means that it's breaking down and floating in the air. So if you have a situation where that cable on your light fixture with asbestos, when you touch it, it flakes off and starts to float around like a virus. That's bad. Now, if you have a fire curtain that's made of asbestos, right, and it's not friable, the OSHA will tell you have to encapsulate it. And how do you encapsulate a fire curtain that's asbestos? Paint, right? So it's captured and it can't break down. So there's lots of nuance around this stuff. I'm not suggesting that anybody should go out and start using Salammoniac. Again, we have safer methods, but I'm just saying don't over
All I know, Stan,
don't over dramatize it.
After I would come out of tech rehearsals back then, I would be coughing, and I'm not a smoker. So whenever I
Well, if
start
you've got
coughing, that
asthma,
means there's
you know.
no, I don't have asthma. Back then I would cough and I knew it was bad for my lungs. So I spent as much time out in the audience as possible at the tech table, even though I had to be on stage as the assistant.
Did you ever smoke cannabis?
Yeah, I smoke cannabis. I used to, yes.
Okay.
Why?
Did you ever smoke cigarettes?
No, never.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
so,
all those things have bad stuff in it.
And you probably took your little heater coil and put it in an OSHA-approved number 5 tomato can on a piece of wood with a
That's about
porcelain
right. That's
socket
about right, Steve.
with a zip cord going from it.
That's about right. Yes, I did.
kids, don't try this at home.
Don't try this at home. We don't know what we're talking about.
Buy or rent a equity-approved haze machine that's water-based, usually water and sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't fool around with chemicals of any type.
Go to the Actors Equity Guidelines and get yourself one of those meters that can tell you the density. We have, we do that at UF. We actually measure the density because there are guidelines on parts per million. And so, do you guys do that at the opera?
No. We don't do density tests.
On the upside of this, though, we have plenty of masks floating around that we can all wear backstage when we light up our Salammoniac.
That's true. That's true.
All right, enough of Salammoniac. Gene from Bangkok asks, the director I work with is always asking for more light on the actors' faces. I bring up the front light, but then the other actors seem dark. So I bring up light on them, and then the director says that it looks too flat. What am I doing wrong?
Oh, David's got this.
Well, we all got it. It's called, you shouldn't be bringing up light. That's the first problem. It's all about contrast, all right? So front light is important. Don't get me wrong. I use front light. We all use front light. But you don't use it at like 90% and then have your like high sides at like 30% or backlight at 20%. It's all about contrast. It's the contrast between intensity of light, the color, and the angle. And it's also the broad contrast of what you're seeing on stage. What part of the stage is lit brighter than others or in more interesting angles? So when the director tells you that they can't see the actors' faces, instead of adding light from the front, just take some light away from the sides or the back. And that's why you're not going to be flooding out the stage with front light. I mean, yeah, bring it up 20%, but if you're having problems, take some other stuff down. So that's my answer. How about you, gentlemen?
I thought you were going to talk about really good side light, David, and front fill or box booms and all that stuff.
No, why should I talk about that? Why don't you talk about it? Go ahead.
Well, I thought that's you can get a lot of the face lit from side light out of the wings. You can get a lot of the face lit from box booms with an angle, which will make the eyeballs sort of twinkle, and you can and then you just fill in some of the shadows gently with the straight. She doesn't really say what she's talking about straight in front light, which is different than diagonal.
I assume that that's
light.
what she's talking about because she says front.
Yeah,
light.
well, you make an when
usually
you
I
assume
call
you know
box
what you
booms
do.
box booms. Yeah, but that's
You
a
use
good point.
Salammoniac.
Yeah, right. Yeah, suck on this Salammoniac cone. You'll start seeing enough light. The directors have that way. Bring up more front light. Bring up more front light. And it's like, oh, God, okay, well, how about if we do this? And Stan has a good point. You can do it from a box boom. It's a lot more interesting angle than straight front light.
She can do a little test right now. Turn on one of your light cues. Let's assume you're in a Puccini March Theater. Turn on one of your better light cues and have a stagehand walk forward until they walk out, into the apron or over the orchestra
into the pit.
and they're going to look terrible. And you'll have all of your front light up, and you'll think, oh, they're looking great because they're going to get brighter out here. No, it's horrible. What's missing? And it's missing, as David says, all the contrast. Everything is missing. It's like your driver's license photograph. You
lose shadows and you lose modeling and you lose three-dimensionality. If they're wearing a costume, you lose the modeling of the costume because you've wiped out all the shadows. There are a lot of really bad things that happen when you come in with front light.
It's about balance. You put a nice video up on the Facebook group last night, I think, about color, and it was really good. I watched it, the whole thing. And at the end, it's all about all of these elements, but it's also about balance. And if you're if you're not balanced, you lose the. He talks about contrast is a big is really about it's fundamental, and then with that, you've got to balance all of these elements, and then,
Yeah, I mean, if you're out of balance, you're out of whack, and you don't want your lighting to be out of whack.
Marjorie in Georgia asks, I've placed several Source 4 fixtures on stage with breakups and donuts. Then I filled the space with haze, and I still do not get a good shaft effect. What am I doing wrong? Well, I have to sort of do a little diagnosis here because I don't really have all the information to be sure. So I'm going to speculate a little bit. Well, let's just talk with a basic principle. So a piece of haze, what is it? It's a particle floating in the air. So that particle, it's Salammoniac. Yeah, it's Sally is floating in the air. And then the little photon named Phil has to hit little Sally, who's floating in the air. And then, there's two issues going on here. Three, actually, I should say, that I think are critical.
Because you forgot about Ralph. Reflection Ralph.
Ooh.
Yeah, reflection Ralph.
Well, hold on. I have
Ingrid.
Ingrid and Ralph. So let me mention all of these little characters here in this play. So Ingrid is incident angle, Ralph is reflective angle, Phil is the photon, and Sally is the Salammoniac, or the particle floating in the air. And there's one more character in this story, and that happens to be me, Stan. And so in order for Stan to see Phil, the photon, reflect off Sally, the particle, the angle of incident.
No, Phil the particle. You said Sally the particle.
Yeah, Phil the particle. Sorry, Phil the photon. Yeah, okay. I have that angle of incident to the haze and reflection off the particle have to then make their way to Stan's retina to perceive it as a shaft of light. So, for example, if you are laying on stage on the floor looking up into the light and it's filled with haze, you're probably not going to see any beams. Okay? So, and it might be happening from some seats and not from others. So you've got to kind of work those angles. The light, yes, they did the right thing with the breakup. That's going to make areas of shaft and areas of darkness. And that's going to create the wonderful David Jacques contrast, right? That you need. Right, you got to have that, right? But you've got to consider the angle of your audience relative to the incident angle of your light bouncing off the particle of haze. Now, there's a lot of variables in that mess I just threw up here, but I think I've got all the characters floating around now.
You forgot one. One.
Which one?
It's a very important one.
Yeah, I bet.
Alfred of altitude. Because altitude. Because what happens with haze a lot of times, and this is why I don't like using haze, is that the haze usually drifts up, or let's say you got an even coverage of haze. Well, the light, as we all know, is strongest at the source and slowly loses energy as it comes down, which means that the brightest part of that beam is going to be very high, which also means that it's going to draw the audience's attention, frank focus, up toward the top. And we want to be looking down at the actor and not at the top of the stage.
This is a great point. And I did neglect to talk about Alfred. So also there are haze machines, the better ones in terms of the chemistry, that do a very good job, regardless of the air movement in the space, of distributing that stuff in such a way that it doesn't fog up the acting space. And it just somehow, I don't know how the chemists have done that, and it sort of lands and fills just the right zone of the stage.
It's Victor. So it all has to do with the ventilation of the stage, right?
Well, that plays a role as well. I know we have a theater here, a small SPT. They run their haze into the house. I don't know how they get away with this. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but I don't know if they're doing it anymore.
They turn off the fire alarms.
No, they pump it into the supply ducts of their HVAC.
Is that illegal?
It's a thrust. I don't know. I wonder about that. We might have to cut that out. I'm not going to name any names.
We're not saying you should do this, kids.
But one of the reasons I bought an MDG
There he is,
hazer,
standing in front of the judge again. I'm
Your
sorry,
Honor, I
I'm
plead
sorry, Your
insanity.
Honor. I didn't
The thing
realize
is,
I
my
was
brothers are gonna
slandering
get
this
me indicted
theater.
here. It's the season for indictments.
That's right.
Okay.
It is. This is the season for indictments.
Let me just jump in here for a second. What my two colleagues are trying to say is that when you go to a rock concert, all that light is focused toward the audience. So you're looking into the beams. If you're on stage, the artists don't see any of that. Go to a concert. All those shafts of light are coming toward you. And sometimes they're coming to the edge of the stage. And then sometimes they elongate it and they put more bite on it. And that light comes out another 10 or 15 feet into the auditorium. And you have a really strong dramatic look. So again, you have to be looking into it. Think about all those old horror movies with people with flashlights walking around on foggy nights and you're looking at the beam of light move in the air. Everything is from your perspective. So if your gobos are in the front of house, let's say, then maybe it's quite dramatic on stage from the actor's point of view, but not from your point of view at the tech table. So you need to reverse those lights if you can and have them come toward the audience, not away from it. Also, you may be using too much fog and haze. You may have socked it in so much that it is diffusing it so much that you can't see anything. There's just too much in the air.
Well said. I didn't assume that Marjorie and Georgia had it in the front light.
Georgia's not that far away from Orlando.
And are we talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene? Because she's in Georgia, too.
Anything is possible.
Okay, maybe she's listening to Light Talk.
I mean, that lady talked about space lasers starting fires, so it's entirely possible.
Well, we do talk about Jewish space lasers on the show.
Kosher Space Lazers. You are listening to Light Talk, and Light Talk today is sponsored by
21st Century Schizoid Products presents the Time to Hang Up Your Hat app. Have you reached that moment in your career when the very thought of entering another dusty old theater is almost as pleasant as a two-way colonoscopy? Well, 21st Century Schizoid Products presents a new app that will not only ease you into retirement, it will guarantee to save you from any further damage to your professional reputation.
Oh, goody.
The Time to Hang Up Your Hat app works with Siri, Alexa, and any other artificial intelligence application. How does it work? Well, while you are peacefully asleep, the app will send you subliminal messages throughout the night, subconsciously convincing you to get real and face the music. Before you know it, your resignation letter will be on the producer's desk. The Time to Hang Up Your Hat app uses several scientifically designed messages that are played back in a multitude of vocal attitudes, depending on your present frame of mind, your stubborn ego, and of course, your tolerance for abuse. Examples include,
the best time to think about your retirement is before the director does. Maybe you should think about having 2 6-month vacations a year. Don't be a victim of your own ego. Get out while you still have a modicum of self-respect and dignity.
Absolutely.
Hey, bud, it might be time to take the world's longest coffee break.
and our most popular and effective,
Get out before people realize that you are a hack.
and that's not all. We also have a special academic version of the app for old, dried-up design professors who desperately hang on to their tenured jobs like the passengers of the Titanic clutching the deck chairs as the ship slowly sinks into freezing waters of the Atlantic. Our academic subliminal messages include,
Retire before your students refer to you as intellectually flaccid and pathetic dead wood. Maybe it's time for a permanent sabbatical.
that's for you, Stan, and the very effective,
If you don't get out soon, they will be asking you to serve as chair.
ouch, that's the worst one.
That's the one. That's when you know it's time.
Look at the bright side. The Time to Hang Up Your Hat app will save you from the regret of wasting the rest of your life in the theater and academia. And now you will have the time to sit around the house with no pants on and focus all your energy on that silly podcast you always wanted to do. 21st Century Schizoid Products, the Time to Hang Up Your Hat app. Buy it before it's too late.
Hey, is it free? Because I want one.
No, this is money. These are our sponsors.
But how much is the app?
I don't know. It can't be like more than $5.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay. In that case, now back to Light Talk.
Well, the sounds of those rabid monkeys means that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today,
Hang on here.
What?
This is episode 274.
Correct.
I put up with this for a long time.
No
we
more
cannot
monkeys?
do that. We can't do this anymore.
Okay.
It was rabid ducks. Do you realize a duck cannot get rabies any more than a monkey can get rabies? So we are maligning not only ducks but monkeys. 2.5 million monkeys on this planet, and they don't get rabies. Now, if you want to talk about hepatitis, got your monkey
the
there.
hepatitis monkeys,
But
okay.
I think it needs
Or
to be
monkeypox.
I think if we're going to be, honest about this, it needs to be rabid raccoons. Raccoons are just a death machine coming at you.
They do have rabies, right?
Yeah, the problem
Yes.
is I don't have raccoon sounds anywhere.
You can find some, I'm sure. Rustling through a garbage can is what they do.
Okay, let's try this again. Well, the sounds of those insane monkeys. Can they go insane, Steve?
Yeah, an insane word.
Okay, that's
or
good.
hepatitis.
That's like the Crazy Eddie commercial.
This is going to be the longest monkey sound we've ever had in our lives. Well, the sounds of those insane monkeys means that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about how straight is your pipe? Well,
Or
okay.
multi-point rigging.
What the hell does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. We're talking about today hanging fixtures and hanging locations that aren't perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. All right? Most of the time we hang lights on electrics or pipes, right, that are hung across the stage, or booms that are vertically, mounted into the damn deck and then tied off to the grid. Box booms that are vertical, maybe with a sidearm that's horizontal. 99% of the time, that's what we use. But there have been times when we may want to hang on an angle. The pipe may be on a 45-degree angle, or maybe it's on a truss that moves. Maybe the angle changes. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, Stan, I'm going to let you start this discussion since you have a lot of experience with automated moving trusses and things like that.
Well, not so much trusses, but I do a lot of automated rigging. And this came up on a project where it was around sound, right? And the notion of sound reflectors overhead. And the team I'm working with was asking, how difficult or expensive would it be to take whatever the sound reflector cloud is and grab it at 4 points to be able to not just lower it up and down, but to tip it and change its angles. And if we did that for all of them, we could completely reshape the reflective qualities of the space for different types of music and such. And so I started down this rabbit hole path of researching this. And then it led me to think, well, I've also got to put lights up in the air too. So could I integrate the lighting with these elements that would be changing their positions and their tilt and camber and all of their angles? And I thought it was really a very, very expensive proposition. But after doing a little research and talking to some folks, it's actually not so hard. And there's a theater at Harvard called Claremont Hall. And they actually did this recently in 2017 with these clouds that do that. And it was all custom hoists, 4-point custom hoists made by Texas Scenic. So I'm going to give them a plug. And the cost wasn't as astronomical as I thought of. So now I'm thinking about as I'm kind of just imagining what we do for acoustics, could we integrate the lighting? And of course, when you get into the lighting issue, what comes up right away is cable management. So if you're going to be changing the tilt, the angle, the height, the elevation of these pieces that are multi-point, let's call them, for lack of a better term, if you will, multi-point rig elements, and they could also come down and come off. So typically what happens is you'll have one type of ceiling for amplified music, which could be permanent, and another type of acoustical treatment, which would be for orchestra or acoustic music. And sometimes you'd want it to make it change, you have to lower it and take it off. And so now I'm thinking about how would I handle the angles of the lights? How would they attach? If they were movers, would they be shaking? How would I handle cable management? So it brings up all these interesting questions. But I do think back to Mark Brickman and some of the early stuff that he did where the trusses, were moving up and down and changing and spinning, and the moving lights were. It's really very exciting kind of ideas that come from this.
Yeah, Brickman first started that, I believe, way back in the 80s with the Genesis tours. And the one tour that I remember specifically was the We Can't Dance tour, where he had those diagonal trusses, and each one of them, they were on like trolleys, and they would go up this diagonal truss, and each one of them had like 2 telescans on them. And telescans were like the size of refrigerators, probably weighed as much as well. And that was a huge engineering feat that they did on that. And they also had those screens moving along curved tracks. And then, of course, Mark Brickman's designs for Pink Floyd, Division Bell, and even earlier tours when they had that huge circular screen with the lights around it, and that screen would pivot. So, yeah, in rock and roll, you saw it a lot.
Yeah, the whole thing tipped, Yeah. I think, yeah. So we're seeing this for being done for acoustical purposes, and then, of course, also lighting purposes. And it's kind of just a, something that I'm exploring these days.
Well, I mean, I think in rock and roll, your cable management problems aren't quite as intense. So you have a panel. I haven't seen the Harbor thing. So there's a panel. There's 4 pickup points on it. Where are you putting the light? Are you mounting the light on the panel?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't gone that far yet. The first level of exploration was, is this out there? Can it be done? Has it been done? And is it within the realm of a realistic budget for the project I'm working on? Now, the Klarman Hall at Harvard, which is a concert hall, you can see that work if you just Google that. They were done just for the acoustic purposes. But I'm thinking I've got to put lights in as well. So I haven't gone that far yet.
How much? Well, I mean, the question, of course, would be how much do you want the acoustic panels to move? Because you might still have, all you've got to do is figure out the 3 angles of light you want to work within, and the light's going to be in a static position. So you can't intrude in those 3 positions with the panels. I mean, my panels have maybe 2 feet of gap between them. So I've got a lot of room between the panels to shoot. So as long as they're staying in their plane and just raking and tilting, it's not quite as hard as if they're all moving. Horizontal movement is much more difficult than vertical movement.
Right. And what was interesting is the hoist that I saw that Texas Scenic developed. This I thought was fast. I shared I'll share with you, Steve, too. I shared some pictures of what they did. In the hoist, it's basically a square, and they're laid out. But to do the tilting part, what they did is there's a drum with the four points, and then they go out to a very small pulley, and that pulley goes like a little baby loft block.
Right.
And that baby loft block is on a worm gear that just moves it horizontally, which changes the tilt. It's not a lot of weight. So those were not designed for light. So your point about interspersing the lighting equipment between the panels. Right now, I'm just waiting for, of course, there's a professional acoustician involved who's going to basically, weigh in on, I think he's driving the question about can we make them dynamic or reconfigurable? And then that's falling to me to sort of figure out how. And now, so I'm researching that and found out that it was done at this one. I think it's being done. So the tipping, front to back is easy. The 4-point thing is much more complex.
Well, I mean, it's unlikely that you would move this during a concert. It's unlikely
Yes.
you would start them in a position, then reposition them for the piano solo, then reposition them for something else.
Correct.
So it seems like if you just built your panels, whatever that size is going to be, let's say 8 by 8, you could still use 4 points of movement. Motor control can handle that easily, and you just have a light attached to the superstructure that holds the acoustic panel. So the light wouldn't move independently of the acoustic panel, it would move with it. And then you'd use moving lights to get your different angles of attack.
Yeah, perhaps. I have to wait and see what they cook up with this whole ceiling idea. But yeah, I haven't thought that far yet. Right. But
Yeah, you guys are really getting fancy. You know, back 10 years ago, I did a show called Lulu. There were some skylights above this huge set designed by Kevin Knight. And I wanted a light to be above the skylights that would travel all the way across the stage. So we stuck a moving light basically on a truss, and then working with the technical director, we were able to figure it out and change the angle and all that other stuff, but it was all manually controlled. So you don't need a lot of money to do this, but it's got to be done safely. So my advice to you is to go ahead and make sure that you work closely with your riggers and your TDs and your master electricians to figure out how to deal with the movement. And as Stan says, how to deal with cable management. That's very important. And when I was talking to Stan about this earlier, I said, hey, man, you just get battery-powered lights, right? Do everything by Bluetooth. But I don't think there are lights powerful enough yet.
It surprised me that Clermont Hall, where they did, which is much bigger than the space that I'm working on, it was just barely over $500,000 in this really large hall to do this. But their lights, unfortunately, were not integrated in the way that Steve suggests. They're just hanging there separately out in a very elegant space. And I was like, with all these PIC lines, and I did not find that to be, acceptable, because I think it ruins the elegance of this, the beauty of the hall.
If they're going to spend that much money, why not add a little more?
Yeah, I think that could have been thought through a little bit better in terms of the integration of the lighting equipment with particularly in Clermont, which I've just learned about just the other day.
Okay. Well, anyway, work with the people. If you don't have the money, you can do this. You can actually, like I said earlier, figure out a way of doing it, but it's got to be safe, because whenever things start moving and you've got a lot of weight on them, it's like what? Drone Focus Deluxe. Once we figure that out, we can stop doing light talk and we can all retire. So we got to figure that one out.
And then what are we going to do?
I don't know. Sit around with no pants on, I guess. Okay, so Steve has our final question of the day.
It's Roger in Pennsylvania, and he writes, how often do you meet with the director during the design process? Well, a lot. I think meeting with the director, where you go wrong is that you meet with the director on a Monday, and you guys talk about the show a little bit. And then someone says, well, let's meet in a week. I think there's the first mistake. I think you don't meet a week later. I think you meet the next day. I think meeting with the director is often, and it's keeping the ball moving forward. And when the director says, how are we going to handle the third act and this and this and this, I want to be able to say, let's get together tomorrow. Let's think about that tonight. Let's talk tomorrow about it. Let's keep this moving forward, as opposed to let's take a week off, because we usually don't need that much time to come up with some ideas about how to solve a problem. So I like to meet with the director as often as I can, and certainly in the early design phases of it, I want to meet a couple times a week, minimum, maybe 3 times a week. It depends on the project and depends on the director's schedule. But most shows, I suspect, even in college these days, I suspect you have about a 6-month lead time. You probably are assigned a show. If you're in school, you're probably assigned a show in September that you're going to be doing in February. So it's not last minute stuff. So I would meet with the director more than less. What about you two?
I think I have like an internal clock where I kind of go, I haven't talked to somebody in how many days? And it's like I need to just touch base, because I think they're evolving and I'm evolving and I'm thinking and they're thinking. And if we go too long without touching base. I agree with Steve, like 2 to 3, every couple of days. Hey, what's up? Even if nothing's changed, but I think that constant contact, not to be annoying, but I have like this, okay, I haven't talked to them in 3 days. I better check in. I think that's right. And that's on any project for me. I mean, I was supposed to get a model on yesterday on a project, and today I don't have the model, and that was not a deadline, but it was sort of, you'll have it on Monday. I didn't show up on Monday and then they called and said it's going to be like Tuesday. Today's Tuesday. I'm not going to bug them, but tomorrow I'm going to say, is everything okay? Because it's been quiet too long.
Well, let's be real. Unless you're working with a really close production team that you've been working with for a while, chances are that the lighting designer is going to be one of the last people who the director is going to meet. Because
that's true.
They are going to be meeting with the set designer and usually come up with the concept and come up with a direction and maybe even come up with the set before you've been asked your opinion.
And you didn't know anything about it. It's a big surprise.
I used to hate that. It doesn't happen to me anymore because I only work with very few directors who believe that I'm a valued part of the development of the design. So, I agree with Steve and I agree with Stan in the perfect world, but in the normal world, usually what happens is that you don't meet with them until, usually they basically say, hey, are you available to do the show? I'm going to suggest you do. Yeah, of course. Okay, great. And then you don't hear from them for a while, and then you get the contract, you do that, and then all of a sudden, the set's been designed. So that's not a great thing. And then you're playing catch up. So, I agree as much and often as possible. And with the few directors I work with, that's the way it really works. So thank God for that.
You like to play on Team Normal, don't you?
Yeah, I'm not on Team Crazy. I am on Team Rabid and Team COVID Brain right now, but not on Team Crazy. So, hey, guess what? In the background, you hear the rocking sounds of the Luminoids, and that tells us that once
Here they are again. They're back again. Those crazy original Luminoids.
Another morning listening to our Crazy Light Talk podcast. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, LiveDesignOnline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every other podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. Be one of the hundreds of thousands of people who download this crazy thing. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
especially rigging ideas.
And Salammoniac.
Stay away from that stuff too, because we don't know what we're talking about there. But in case you decide to litigate us, the law firm of Flex, Block, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Sneet will defend us until those retirement funds are completely gone.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Central City, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you a big heaping from our casserole of nonsense.
We have a big cabinet of that, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and a little bit of humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.